Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at some fascinating material from Kesser and Steen. They've been researching air quality in two coastal towns that, on the surface, look almost identical.
They do. Same coastline, similar size, the works.
But there's a mystery. One town has consistently higher levels of particulate pollution, nasty stuff in the air. So our mission today is to figure out why, to trace this pollution back and see what it tells us about some, well, much bigger problems.
And that higher particle count is really the starting gun for this whole investigation, isn't it? As you said, the towns are similar, but the data tells a different story.
So where do they start looking?
Well, the most obvious culprit, the one they both share, is the widespread use of old residential wood-burning stoves.
Right. And we know from other studies, especially in places like Denmark, that residential wood burning is, it's a huge source of local particle pollution. It almost seems counterintuitive. You picture these giant industrial smokestacks.
You do, but it all comes down to control and temperature. An industrial plant, even an old one, usually has some kind of filtration system. It's regulated, and it's designed to burn hot and efficiently.
Whereas at home,
At home, it's the Wild West. People burn wood that's too wet, or they'll choke the air supply to get a slow, smoldering fire overnight.
which saves wood, but
But it's terrible for combustion. That low temperature means you get this thick, sooty smoke full of unburned compounds, and there's absolutely zero filtration between the chimney and the air your neighbors are breathing.
so, okay, initial finding. Wood stoves are a big part of the problem. But as Kesser and Steen pointed out, that doesn't explain why Town A is so much worse than Town B. It doesn't give us the specifics.
Exactly. It doesn't give us the meat on the bone, as they put it. Just saying wood stoves are bad doesn't solve the local mystery.
So we have to go deeper, past the obvious answer.
We do. And the research suggests the real answer is in a whole chain of interconnected failures. It starts with chemistry, goes to these huge physical hazards, and ends up revealing, well, a massive inefficiency in the town's energy system.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to start with the invisible threat itself, particulate matter. Then we'll zoom out to look at a huge, steaming local hazard, these wood chip piles. From there, we'll expose the problems in the district heating system, and finally, look at some really smart local alternatives.
Sounds like a plan.
So let's start small, microscopic even. Particulate matter, or PM.
Right. So when you hear air quality reports, they're usually talking about PM 2.5 and PM 10.
And PM just stands for particulate matter, basically dust.
Exactly. The number is the size. It's the diameter in micrometers. To give you some perspective, a single human hair is about, 50 to 70 micrometers across?
Wow, so PM10 is tiny.
It is 10 micrometers or smaller. But PM 2.5, that's the really nasty stuff. That's ultrafine, 2.5 micrometers or less.
And that size difference is absolutely critical for health, right? It's not just about how much dust, but how small it is.
It's all about how deep it can get into your body. PM10 particles are, relatively big. They tend to get trapped in your nose and throat.
Your upper respiratory tract. And you can cough or sneeze them out.
You can. Your body has defenses. But the PM 2.5 particles are so incredibly small, they bypass all of that. They travel deep into the lungs, into the little air sacs called the alveoli.
Which where oxygen gets into your blood.
Precisely. And because the membranes there are so thin, these ultrafine particles can pass directly through them and get into your bloodstream. And once they're in your blood, they can go anywhere. Your heart, your brain, every organ.
So the wood stoves are just pumping this stuff out.
Yeah.
But it's not just simple soot, is it? The sources talk about this complex chemical cocktail, specifically volatile organic compounds, or VOCs.
Yes, and that gets back to the incomplete combustion problem. When you burn wood too cold, you don't get a clean burn into kayoa and water.
You get leftovers.
A lot of leftovers. Big, complex chains of carbon that haven't been fully burned. Those are the VOCs. They're chemicals that evaporate really easily, and they're what give wood smoke that sharp, kind of distinctive smell.
And they're a key ingredient for smog.
A primary ingredient. Which brings us to what Kesser and Steen called the smog equation. You have the VOCs from the wood smoke, but they need something to react with.
A catalyst of some sort.
Exactly. And that catalyst is a group of chemicals called nitrogen oxides, or NOx.
NOx. I've heard that in relation to car exhaust.
You have. NOx forms anytime you have very high temperatures. It's created when the nitrogen and oxygen that are already in the air get superheated. So car engines, industrial furnaces.
And even in a wood stove?
And even in the hottest parts of a wood stove or a heating plant, yes. So now you have your ingredients in the air, VOCs and NOx.
And what's the final piece of the equation?
Sunlight. On a still, sunny day with not much wind, the sunlight provides the energy to cook these chemicals together.
A photochemical reaction.
That's the one. The VOCs and NOx react, and they create ground-level ozone. Now, this isn't the good ozone, the stuff high up in the stratosphere that protects us.
This is bad ozone, down here where we breathe.
It's highly toxic, a very powerful oxidant that irritates and damages the lungs. And that ground-level ozone, combined with the original particulate matter, is what we call smog.
So the ozone isn't coming out of the chimney directly. It's being manufactured in the air itself from the waste products.
Precisely. And that's why a single person's choice, to damp down their fire to make a law last longer, has community-wide consequences. They're unknowingly adding ingredients to the air that will create a regional pollution event.
Which leads us to the health implications, because this is where it moves from just being, an annoyance to something causing serious systemic damage.
It is. So you inhale this toxic soot PM, NOx VOCs. The first thing that happens is the VOCs dissolve into the mucus lining your lungs and airways.
And they get absorbed quickly.
Very quickly. They're often fat-soluble, so they get into your bloodstream fast. And immediately they act as irritants. They damage the lining of your lungs, they trigger inflammation, and you get those immediate symptoms.
The headache, the cough, just that general feeling of fatigue you get on a day with bad air quality.
That's your body's initial response. But the sources, they really stress the long-term danger. And this is where it gets really interesting. The link between chronic exposure and diseases like COPD.
Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. How does that connection work?
Well, think about that inflammation. If it happens once in a while, your body recovers. But if it's happening every day, continuously, your body is constantly trying to repair the damage in your lungs.
And that constant repair process causes its own problems.
It does. It leads to scarring, a thickening of the airway walls, and your body starts producing way too much mucus. Those are the classic hallmarks of COPD. The lung tissue literally remodels itself in a dysfunctional way because of the repeated chemical assault.
But the source is mentioned an even scarier risk, the idea that these compounds can bind directly to our DNA.
And they can. This is what we call carcinogenic potential. Many of these VOCs, when your body tries to break them down, are metabolized into highly reactive chemicals.
So the breakdown process actually makes them more dangerous.
In some cases, yes. These reactive byproducts have a strong urge to bind to other things, including the molecules in your body. If they bind to your DNA, they create what's called an adduct. It's a little damaged site on the DNA strand.
Which can cause a mutation.
And if that mutation isn't repaired properly by the cell, it can be the first step on the road to cancer or other really severe chronic diseases.
So even if it doesn't cause cancer, the damage is still happening. The sources mention disruption to the liver and nervous system.
Right. Because the liver is your body's main detox center. It's full of special enzymes that are designed to break down toxins. But if you're constantly bombarding it with these VOCs, you can actually impair the function of those enzymes.
So you're not just being attacked by the pollution.
Your body's ability to defend itself and clean itself out is being crippled at the same time. The toxins hang around longer, they accumulate, and the damage just compounds over months and years.
Which makes it pretty clear why certain groups are so much more vulnerable.
Absolutely. The research talks about the double burden for older people, especially someone who maybe smoked in the past or already has COPD. Their lung function is already compromised.
They have fewer defenses to start with.
Exactly. And as we age, all our systems slow down. The little hairs in our lungs that clear out mucus and particles, they don't work as well. Our enzyme systems are less robust.
So you combine that existing fragility with this chemical assault that also damages your ability to cleanse. There's a downward spiral.
It's a spiral. The damage doesn't clear, it just builds up. And that's when you see the risk for things like severe bronchitis, pneumonia, even heart problems triggered by all that systemic inflammation. It just skyrockets.
So managing this isn't just about clean air. It's about public health and longevity.
It's fundamental.
That sets the stage perfectly.
Yeah.
We've gone from the microscopic threat to the systemic damage. Now we have to zoom out to something very, very visible. Something that's adding to the town's pollution problem. The enormous, steaming, smelly piles of wood chips down at the harbor.
Yes. The elephant in the room. Or rather, the mountain of wood chips. Steen's observation about the Darth Vader breathing was so evocative.
Because you could just see these plumes of steam rising from the piles.
Constantly. And the sources note this very distinct, strong smell that carries, a long way on the wind. That's your first clue that these piles are not just inert piles of wood. They are biologically active pollution factories.
So that smell, it's not just sawdust. It's a mix of dust, spores, and all these volatile compounds from decomposition. What is it about these huge bunkers that makes them so perfect for this kind of runaway biology?
They are, for all intents and purposes, custom-built bioreactors. You couldn't design a better environment for microbes if you tried.
What are the ingredients?
You need three things. One, a huge amount of organic material, the wood chips or trifolius. Two, moisture from rain or just the dampness of the wood. And three, the secret ingredient, poor ventilation deep inside the pile.
Because the sheer size of the pile acts as insulation.
Perfect insulation. It traps all the heat that's being generated by the microbes as they work.
So what's actually living and growing in there?
You're looking at a whole ecosystem of fungi, molds, and a special class of bacteria called thermophiles.
Thermophiles, meaning they love heat.
They thrive in it. As all these microorganisms break down the wood, eating the sugars, the cellulose, they produce waste. And that waste includes gases, more VOCs, and a massive amount of heat.
And that heat is what creates the steam, the Darth Vader breathing.
That steam is proof of thermogenesis. We're talking about temperatures deep inside those piles that can easily reach 50, 60, even 70 degrees Celsius.
That's incredibly hot, like a compost pile on steroids.
Yeah. Exactly. And that heat evaporates the water inside, which then rises up out of the pile. The sources described it as a sweating horse. It's just constantly giving off this hot, moist, chemically laden vapor.
So if you're a resident of this town and you can smell that odor and see that steam, what is actually being carried on the wind? What are you breathing in?
Two main things. First are the VOCs and the fermentation gases. That's what you're smelling. But second, and just as important, are the spores. The fungi and molds are constantly reproducing.
We're releasing billions of microscopic spores into the air.
Billions. And because the piles are so huge and exposed, the wind just picks them up and carries them across the town. They are effectively a biological form of particulate matter.
And how do these spores affect your health compared to, say, the chemical VOCs?
They're more of an irritant and an allergen. For a healthy person, it might just be annoying. But if you have asthma or allergies or existing COPD, inhaling a cloud of these spores can trigger a really severe reaction.
Coughing, chest tightness.
Or a full-blown asthma attack. It's like having an uncontrolled biological dust storm generated right in the middle of your town's harbor.
And the sources mention it can get even worse. If the pile is too dense and wet, the oxygen can run out deep inside.
And that's when things get really nasty. The process shifts from aerobic decomposition with oxygen to anaerobic without oxygen.
And that produces different chemicals.
Very different and much more potent. You start getting organic acids. That's where you get these really sharp, sour smells like concentrated vinegar or ammonia. The chemical signature changes, and you get a whole new, more aggressive batch of VOCs being pumped into the air.
So these piles are a constant, uncontrolled source of pollution, totally separate from the wood stoves. But Kesser and Steen pointed out another huge problem with this whole setup, an inefficiency and a terrifying safety risk.
Yes, this is the core energy paradox. The town buys these wood chips as fuel for the heating plant, right? But letting them sit there for months while microbes eat them is just, it's financially insane.
The bacteria are literally eating the fuel.
They're using the carbon in the wood as their own energy source, and they're releasing it as waste heat, Chiaro, and methane.
So you buy a ton of wood chips, and by the time you get around to burning it 6 months later,
the caloric value is significantly lower. The bacteria have already used up maybe 5 or 10% of the energy. You are paying for fuel that is actively being consumed and turned into pollution before it even reaches the furnace. It's an incredible waste.
it defeats the entire purpose of having a fuel reserve.
Yeah.
But then there's the safety risk, which is extreme. The sources specifically mentioned the danger of having these hot piles right next to other reactive industrial chemicals,
Like ammonium nitrate.
which is used in fertilizer.
Common fertilizer, yes. And this is where you have a potential recipe for disaster. You have a massive heat source. Remember, 70 degrees Celsius inside the pile, right next to a highly reactive oxidizing agent.
And why does that specific combination increase the release of NOx, feeding back into that smog equation we talked about?
Because when ammonium nitrate is heated, especially when it's in contact with organic material like decomposing wood, the heat accelerates its own breakdown. And that decomposition process releases various nitrogen compounds, including more non-NOx gases.
So the bad storage plan is actually creating a whole new passive, uncontrolled source of smog ingredients.
An industrial source, yes, generated just by poor planning. And that's before we even get to the primary risk, which is, of course, fire or explosion.
Spontaneous combustion.
It's a very real risk. The temperatures inside can get high enough to ignite the very fine, dry wood dust. And if that heat interacts with an oxidizer like ammonium nitrate, well, you have the potential for a very rapid, violent chemical reaction, a massive fire, or even worse, we've seen it happen in industrial accidents elsewhere.
And the sources say this whole dangerous cycle is accelerated by something as simple as rain.
The contamination cycle, yes, this is the final piece of that puzzle. Ammonium nitrate dissolves very easily in water, so it rains, the rainwater flows over some poorly stored fertilizer bags, dissolves the salts.
And that nutrient-rich water then soaks into the wood chip pile.
And it acts like a super fertilizer for the microbes. You're suddenly giving this already hyperactive microbial factory a massive, easily accessible shot of nitrogen.
So it's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
In a biological sense, yes. It dramatically ramps up the rate of decomposition. That means more heat, more gas release, more VOCs, more spores. Kesser and Steen's work shows how a simple bad smell points to this incredibly complex, accelerating, and dangerous local hazard.
Which brings us to the next logical question. Why is the town willing to put up with this hazard and waste so much fuel? And that brings us to Section 3, the systemic failure of the district heating system itself.
And this is where you really see the gap between theory and reality. The sources say a modern, well-maintained district heating plant burning these chips can be incredibly efficient, like 80 to 90% thermal utilization.
That's almost all of the energy in the wood being turned into useful heat.
It's world-class. But the system Kesser and Steen were looking at, it's 40 years old. We're talking rusty pipes, known leaks, running for miles under the town.
So what's the real-world efficiency of a system like that?
You'd be lucky to get 60 or 70% of the energy to the consumer's radiator. It's a massive drop-off. You're burning this fuel with all the costs and pollution that entails, and then just losing a huge chunk of the heat before it even gets where it's going.
Let's really dig into that. The sources estimate a network loss of around 25%. A quarter of the heat just vanishes. How?
It's just physical decay. The insulation they used 4 decades ago is nothing like modern materials, and over time it breaks down, it gets waterlogged from the ground, and it loses its effectiveness.
And then there's the rust.
Inevitable. The pipes corrode. You get constant small leaks. Sometimes you can even see them on a cold day. Little patches of steam rising from a sidewalk or a lawn.
And that's not just water leaking out. It's superheated water and steam. It's pure energy bleeding into the earth.
Pure energy, yes. The town is effectively paying to heat the subsoil. And the municipal crews are always playing whack-a-mole, digging up one street to fix a leak, knowing that another one is going to spring up somewhere else in this aging network.
Which raises that big question. Why are they budgeting for 25% waste every single year instead of budgeting to replace the system?
Because it's a huge capital expense, and they're caught in this self-defeating cycle. And it's made even worse by what the sources call the FLIS travel factor.
Right. They're not even using local wood. They're importing logs from places like Kaliningrad.
Which means shipping. So right off the bat, you're adding transport zero to the equation. But more than that, imported wood might have a higher moisture content. It might have been stored poorly before it even got here.
And as we already established, wet, low-quality fuel means a dirtier, less efficient burn back at the plant.
Exactly. The plant has to burn more fuel just to boil off the extra water before it can even start making useful heat. That means lower efficiency and higher emissions of VOCs and particles right there at the source.
So it's a whole chain of waste. Lower quality fuel shipped from far away, burned inefficiently to produce heat that then gets lost in leaky pipes.
It's a perfect storm of inefficiency.
But they are trying to clean up the mess at the end, right? The sources mention a very specific cost, 300,000 Danish kroner a year for chemicals.
That's a huge operating expense, and that money is almost certainly for running the plant's flue gas scrubbers.
So systems designed to clean the exhaust before it goes up the smokestack.
Precisely. To meet modern environmental laws, you need these advanced systems. They use chemical reactions to pull the worst pollutants out of the smoke.
Can you break that down? What do the scrubbers actually do?
They do a few things. First, they remove the particulate matter, the soot and ash, usually with big filters or electrostatic fields. Second, they neutralize acid gases like sulfur and nitrogen oxides. That's where the chemicals come in. You inject something like a lime slurry that reacts with the gases and turns them into a solid you can capture.
And they also deal with the VOCs.
They try to. They often use things like activated carbon injection to absorb the more complex organic pollutants. But the point is, it's a very expensive, continuous process.
So the town is spending 300,000 kroners every year to clean up the pollution created by burning bad fuel in a leaky system.
When you connect it to the bigger picture, it's just staggering. It's all reaction, no prevention. Think about it. Over 10 years, that's 3 million kroner spent on chemicals. And at the end of that decade, what do you have?
The same leaky pipes and the same reliance on imported wood.
Exactly. But what if you took that 300,000 kroner a year and used it to secure a bond to start replacing the worst sections of pipe? You could make a real permanent improvement. You'd cut the heat loss, which means you'd need to burn less fuel in the first place.
The spending priority is completely backward. They're paying a fortune to manage the symptom.
Instead of investing to cure the disease. And that fundamental inefficiency is what led Kesser and Steen to the final part of their work, looking for better, smarter, more localized ways to generate energy.
A way to get out of this cycle.
A way to break the chain of waste. And they started by looking at another inefficient process, how the town handles its garbage.
Right. The current model is just to truck all the non-recyclable waste a long way away.
Which is another huge cost. The fuel for the trucks, the emissions, the time the drivers spend on the road, it's all waste. So Kesser and Steen asked a simple question. Why are we accepting all these uncontrolled hazards like the rotting wood piles when we could be using local resources in a controlled way?
Which brings us to their aha moment.
The biogas solution.
Taking local organic waste kitchen scraps, agricultural manure, and turning it into energy right there in the town.
Through a process called anaerobic digestion. And this one idea, this one shift in thinking, it solves almost every single problem they uncovered.
Let's break down that triple benefit. How does making biogas solve these issues?
Okay, benefit one, energy utilization. The process creates methane gas, which is a clean-burning fuel. You can put it right into the existing district heating network or even use it to power the town's vehicles.
Benefit two, logistics.
You drastically cut down on transport. The waste is processed locally, so your garbage trucks aren't making long-haul trips anymore. That saves fuel, money, and cuts emissions.
And benefit three, which is maybe the most important for the town's health, environmental control.
This is the big one. The whole process happens inside large, sealed, airtight tanks. There are no open, steaming piles. There are no VOCs, no fungal spores, no pungent odors being released into the neighborhood.
It's all contained.
Completely contained. And the byproduct, the stuff left over after you make the gas, is a sanitized, nutrient-rich liquid that's a perfect fertilizer. There's almost zero waste in the entire system. You've taken a pollution source and turned it into a fuel source and a fertilizer source.
It also solves that other logistical problem Steen was talking about, the sheer amount of time wasted by the drivers.
The comparison to the heat lost in the pipes was brilliant. That hour and a half a garbage truck driver spends on a round trip to a distant facility it's dead time. It's a pure cost. Localizing the process makes the whole system so much more efficient.
But building a new biogas plant sounds expensive. It needs land, infrastructure.
It does. But this is where their idea for creative repurposing comes in. They suggest using the industrial relics that are already there.
Like the old fuel storage tanks down at the harbor.
Exactly. The old tanks they used for gasoline or diesel. You clean them out thoroughly, refurbish them, and you can reuse them as sealed buffer tanks to hold the organic slurry before it goes into the digester.
That is clever. You avoid having to build brand new tanks from scratch.
And you turn a potential liability, an old contaminated industrial site that would cost a fortune to clean up, into a valuable asset in your new sustainable energy system.
You create this local energy hub. You collect local waste, store it in these repurposed tanks, create clean fuel, and pump it right into the district heating network you already have.
It's an elegant, closed-loop system. It dramatically reduces your need for imported, low-quality wood chips, and it eliminates the environmental health risks of storing them.
And this isn't just a theory, is it? People are actually doing this.
Oh, absolutely. The sources point to real-world examples, like these modular, container-based biogas plants in Austria. They're designed for smaller communities. They're flexible. They can be scaled up or down as needed. It's a proven technology.
It's incredible. Kesser and Steen started by looking at microscopic particles in the air.
And they ended up uncovering this huge interconnected puzzle of logistics, chemistry, and aging infrastructure.
And the real lesson seems to be that the things you can see and smell, the smog, the smelly piles, they're just symptoms.
They're symptoms of a much deeper systemic inefficiency in how the town was managing its resources. The solution isn't just a better filter on a smokestack. It's a fundamental rethinking of how everything flows through the community.
So what does this all mean? We've gone from cellular damage all the way to a 25% heat loss in rusty pipes.
I think the key takeaway is that the most economical solution is also the most environmental one. Right now, that community is trapped in an expensive cycle of waste. They're paying 300,000 kroners a year for chemical cleanup, and they're accepting massive energy loss just to keep a broken system running.
When the resources for a better system are right there.
They're right under their noses, the local waste, the money they're already spending on cleanup, the industrial land they could repurpose. The shift is all about moving from a reactive mindset to a preventative one.
It's the difference between paying endlessly to mop up a spill versus investing once to fix the leak.
You've hit the nail on the head. A controlled, modern biogas system isn't just healthier for the residents, it's far more fiscally responsible in the long run.
We saw that this community spends 300,000 kroners every year just cleaning up the emissions from their inefficient system. And that raises a really important question for any town in a similar situation. If you prioritize prevention, if you took that same 300,000 kroner and invested it directly, maybe to upgrade just the worst 5% of your leaky pipes each year, or to build one of these small modular biogas facilities, how quickly could you achieve both energy independence and clean air, maximizing the value of every single dollar you spend?
That's something every municipality with aging infrastructure needs to be asking itself. The power to make that systemic change is right there, in local hands.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into hazardous piles and hidden heat loss. Today we're looking at some fascinating material from Kesser and Steen. They've been researching air quality in two coastal towns that, on the surface, look almost identical.
They do. Same coastline, similar size, the works.